I want to congratulate you for being here. You're in the 1% of the 1% who realize that the issue of concepts is what controls the course of history and the lives of individuals. Whether you think that liberal democracy has to be protected from corporate imperialism, or whether you think liberal democracy has to be protected from the Chinese who are killing us in their trade, your concepts are all wrong, and it's your concepts that are messing you up. Now, people in here don't think that, I hope. No one thinks that, right? Liberal, vague. Democracy, package deal. Killing, package deal. Imperialism, anti-concept. And on it goes. It's the concepts that we use that control how we frame events, how we evaluate them, how we chart the course of our lives. Suppose you work real hard and you make a lot of money. Unfair. Inequality. It's unfair. Well, what is the meaning of fair? Meaning of fair? I mean, fair is fair. It's just given. We know what fair is. We've read Piketty's book. And before that, Rawls's book. So how you evaluate your own performance, how others evaluate your performance, what they permit you to do rather than recognize your right to do, all depends upon the concepts that they use. All the errors in politics and in morality and in judging events and people in real life come down to the misformation and misapplication of concepts, mainly the misformation. Looking at it positively, all the great things that we have, the glory of human existence comes from concepts, from validly formed, correct concepts. Everything that makes us human comes from the thinking mind. And thinking is sentences, propositions. Propositions are composed of concepts, basically a subject concept, and the thing that's said about the subject, the predicate concept. Propositions are the cash value of concepts. Concepts without propositions are pointless. Propositions will be the cashing in, the climax of this course in the last lecture. So I'm speaking about thought, the thinking that makes us human, and it's propositions composed of concepts. A proposition has two or more concepts. Well, there is the simplest proposition: table, bottle. But beyond that, it's the bottle is clear. The table is sturdy. The table is heavy. The table is modern in design. These combinations of concepts have to involve concepts beyond the first level: table, bottle, person, dog, cloud. To say something about something, you have to have what are called higher order concepts, concepts formed from earlier concepts. And that's the main body of what we'll be discussing in classes 2, 3, and 4, is the formation of higher order concepts, because this is terra incognita for the rest of philosophy. It's only Ayn Rand, to some extent, tiny extent, John Locke made some faltering steps in this direction. But it's really only Ayn Rand who has a developed theory of how we go from first level concepts to higher order concepts. The question is, how do concepts get formed? How do higher ordered concepts get formed? How are concepts combined into propositions? And the core problem is how do concepts get formed? As Ayn Rand says, the issue of concepts, known as the problem of universals, is philosophy's central issue. Since man's knowledge is gained and held in conceptual form, the validity of man's knowledge depends on the validity of concepts. There's a lot in there. Held in conceptual form, held is something that we're going to spend a lot of time unpacking. But at the first level here, we're talking about this is a big deal. This is the issue of how do we know that our thinking corresponds to reality? The guy who raised this question implicitly was Socrates. He went around asking, what is the one thing that makes all instances of justice, piety, right, truth, instances of it? What is the one universal? One universal just means present in each, right? Generally true. What is the one universal feature uniting all acts of justice, all acts of piety, etc.? The problem is, why is there a problem? Plato went on to say, well, wait a minute, let's ask the bigger question. What is a universal? What is it to be the one in the many? What is the relationship between abstractions, he didn't think of them as abstraction, concepts, ideas, and concretes? To what precisely do concepts refer in reality? As the Greeks put it, where is the one in the many? Where is the one man in the many men? Now, the Greeks are very colorful people, the ancient Greeks. They took philosophy very seriously, and they had a lot of characters. One of them was this guy, Antisthenes, who said, I have seen many men, but never have I seen man. So where is man? You know, man needs self-esteem. Man needs freedom. And it's not just man. The mind can't function under force. Where is the mind? I know I have my mind. I assume you have your minds. But where is the mind? So the problem here, to now break it down into three parts, the problem universals is reality is concrete. Concepts are abstract. Concretes are particular. Concepts are general. And concretes differ, and this is where the rubber really hits the road. Concretes differ. This man and that man are not the same. But concepts treat them as the same. Man needs self-esteem, not Joe needs self-esteem and Bill needs self-esteem. Now, there are two theories, the usual suspects here. Realism, it's called realism, unfortunately. It sounds like it's something good, right? But realism in the theory of concepts means that concepts are part of reality. Universals are intrinsic in things. The man, or manness, man himself, is out there waiting to be seen. Plato said to Antisthenes, you don't see man because you're looking with your physical eye. Look with your mind's eye. Your mind can get the form of man that exists in another dimension in the world of forms which you can't see with your senses. It's like a heaven. The Christians took their idea of heaven largely from this. Then there are the, oh, come on, school, nominalism. Universals are subjective. We make them. There's nothing out there that corresponds to man. It's just that we use words in a certain way. Now, I'm going to give the nominalists the polemical shaft in a minute, but let's take up the best, because I want you to appreciate that there is a real problem here. John Locke, one of the few good guys in the history of philosophy, 1632 to 1704, the founding father's founding father. He's responsible for the whole theory of rights. And he had some pretty good things, but mixed up in epistemology. So he has the best theory of universals in the history of thought before Ayn Rand. He said that the universal is an attribute that's the same in the various concretes, like the whiteness of snow and the whiteness of milk. You separate out that the snow is very, very cold and the milk is only cool. You separate out that the snow is granular and milk is liquid. You separate out that the snow comes from the sky and the milk from the cow. And you are left just with the whiteness. If you drop out enough of the differing attributes, you'll come to that they both have whiteness, and you focus on that one thing to the exclusion of that which differs. And when you see it again, like in this tablecloth in front of us, you reckon, oh yeah, that's the same thing that was in milk and in snow. Sounds pretty good. Problem is that he picked a very special case, and even that special case fails. So you see there's snow and milk. They aren't the same white. I'm sorry, there's no whiteness that's identical in milk and snow, and to show that, I put them together. See how milky the milk looks against the snow? It's not the same white. And what are you going to do with this? Here's a spectrum I found on the internet of blue. Those are pure monochromatic shades of blue. We have no hesitancy in calling them all blue, but they're all different. And to show you that, you see where the white lines are cut out and moved together, two shades. They're not the same. Put together, one looks purple and the other looks aqua, greenish, right? But in context, they both look like blue. That is, when compared to the appropriate intermediate shades, they both look blue. Then we come to this somewhat deranged individual, Ludwig Wittgenstein, who actually, I mean, if he hadn't said this, we would have had to pay somebody to say it. What's common to all the shades of blue? Quote, nothing more than that we use the word blue in all these cases. Fantastic. I mean, you couldn't make it up. So here's something that you haven't seen before. What word do you think you would use for this? Jealousy? Tomato? Afternoon? You have 20,000 words in your vocabulary. I bet if I asked you to write down, 99% of you, leaving aside the Antisthenes types among you, would write watch or wristwatch. How can that be? The only thing in common between this and anything else you've ever seen and called watch is that you now use the word watch. But there are lots of things you've called afternoon. How come you're using watch for this? All of you. It's the most unbelievable coincidence. And not afternoon. So this is not a good theory. And if we get past blue, we're here to discuss higher level concepts. Well, color is a higher, next level higher after blue, right? So where is the one identical coloredness in all those beautifully shaded tomatoes? Those are dyed tomatoes or tomatoes shot with a filter or something. Where is the coloredness? I see the orange, I see the red, I see the green. Where's the coloredness? Well, let's ignore the orange. Oh, then if I ignore the orange, I'm left with just the shape. You can't strip away the specific form in which an attribute takes from the attribute. Orange, that shade of orange that you're looking at there, that shade of orange, is not a combination of two things. Coloredness modified by orangeness. It just is a certain combination of wavelengths of light reflecting from that surface. And you know from your monitors, you can give it 3 numbers in RGB, red, green, blue combo, and it's 3 numbers. It isn't a combination of quantity plus 3 numbers. It's light of certain 3 wavelengths mixed together. Or how about these? Strip away the different shapes, and what have you got? Nothing. Or well, I guess you have dark. The differences there are differences in the triangularity. There's no triangularity plus rightness plus scaliness plus isosceles-ness. And what if we go to a higher order concept? Polygon. Where is the universal? Well, they're all closed plane figures. Yes, but they're all different closed. Some have 5 sides, some have, I think I made 8, some have 4, some have 3. Where's the polygon anality there that makes them all polygons? There isn't any. Now, moderate nihilism, leaving Wittgenstein's extreme statement behind us, there is moderate nominalism, which says, okay, it's not just that we use the same word, they resemble each other, they're similar. And this could be looked at as an advance. But it faces 2 problems. Similarity is just a feeling as they hold it. It's just an unanalyzable primary. So I parody that as, there are all these different concretes that you feel they go together, so you call them all by the same name. That's not a theory, right? That's hand-waving in the extreme, throwing up your hands in despair, and the 2 problems that it cannot answer. How similar do things have to be in order to warrant being filed together? And similar, how? Cute, huh? That came to me in a course at the University of Texas that I taught in 2002. How similar and similar how? Let's take how similar. And of course the theme is the answers nominalists give or open the door to subjectivism. One of the things that we are here to fight for is the objectivity of human development, of what makes a human being a human being, right? I mean, it's particularly in regard to abortion that we see this issue of what is man have tremendous political, personal, social meaning. Okay, how similar do things have to be to a baby in order to qualify as a man? And you see there the weeks of gestation. And it's, of course, these are quantized into weeks. You could take it by seconds. It's a continuous development. How similar, where do you draw the line? How similar do they have to be? Well, according to nominalism, it's just a social question. It's wherever people decide. Let's vote on it. There's no facts. It's all continuous. It's an arbitrary decision of society. So forget rights. I think the more interesting problem is similar how, and because it plays more directly into the objectivist solution. Here we have a pumpkin and a baseball, and they're similar. I mean, they look alike, right? The shape is the same, the color is different, but you could focus on the shape and say one's bigger, one's oranger, but they have pretty similar shapes. Yeah, I feel like those go together. Oh, hockey puck. Yeah, that's similar to baseball. They're both sports objects that are pushed or thrown or hit around the field. The hockey puck is like, does for hockey what the baseball does for baseball. And sure, the hockey puck is similar to the hockey stick. They're both parts of the game of hockey. Yeah, they belong together. Oh, yeah. Hockey stick looks like a broom. And in fact, they sweep the ice with it. I mean, they make a kind of sweeping motion. I think you're taught in hockey, think of sweeping with a broom. You're taught that way to swing the stick. Yeah, so we're left with a pumpkin belongs with a broom. Something has gone very wrong. And it's under that heading of similar how, because we began with similarity in shape, then we shifted to similarity in function, then we shifted to similarity in proximity of use, both used in the hockey game. Then we switched to similarity in shape. And if you do that, you've got modern thinking. And I'm very sorry for you. So nominalism is not a theory. It's just throwing up one's hands in despair, or, for the worst people, in gleeful whim worship. You can't tell me how to define terms. It's up to me. The only game in town is realism, the alternative to nominalism, or at least until July 1966, that was the only game in town. July 1966 is when Ayn Rand began publication of Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, which escapes the false alternative of realism versus nominalism. And here are the false premises that Ayn Rand checked and rejected. First, the two metaphysical aspects of realism, the two assumptions it makes, that the concretes have to be identical. Man is, since the concept treats them as identical in a certain respect, they have to be identical in some respect, which means they have to be blurry, because they have to have triangularity, which is a non-specific feature. We got to say that the right angle triangle and the scaling triangle are the same, are identical. So they have to be identical in some blurry, vague thing called triangularity. Because they're not identical if you put a ruler next to them and measure them. They're just not. The other false metaphysical part was the assumption that there's something that's a part of a given concrete that you can find in it. There's just the mouseness. If I look hard enough, I'll find the mouseness of this. It's not the redness, it's not the shape, but there's mouseness in there somewhere. No, says Ayn Rand. And consequently, epistemologically, abstraction is not subtraction. Another Binswanger soundbite. Abstraction is not subtraction, meaning all of them assume, well, you throw out this attribute that's different, and you throw out that attribute that's different. You subtract away the shape, you subtract away the color, you subtract away the weight, you subtract away the history, you subtract away the price, you subtract away the position, and you're left with mouseness somehow. No. Abstraction is not stripping away things. If you think it is, then you think you can get mouseness by looking more closely, with your mind's eye maybe, at the mouse, and you'll find it in there somewhere. Or you look more closely at a human being, and you focus on something that you can call his manness. Why? Because it's there as a part. So you look for it. And the quandary is that there's nothing identical. There isn't any such part, as nominalists gleefully point out. And the arch example is look at the numbers. What is the quantity that's the same in 1, 2, 3, 4, and a million? We have the idea of number, embracing them all. We have the idea of quantity is what they measure. But they're all different quantities. If you take the threeness out of the three, you haven't got anything left. Now, this is a very interesting man. This is Brand Blanchard, who is great on attacking the silliness of contemporary philosophy. He's recently, in my scale of things recently, in our lifetime, deceased, 1987. He wrote Reason and Analysis, Reason and the Nature of Thought, Reason and Goodness. And Ayn Rand had some conversations with him or communication with him. In fact, I had exchanged one letter with him on irrelevancy. So he's a very well-known and very contemporary figure. Has a lot of good aspects, but he is unbelievably bad on universals. He is like the anti-Antisthenes. He says, yes, the universal would have to be identical, and it would have to be the same attribute in the individual concretes. So the place that you find it is in places like postage stamps. There's a universal there. There's a sameness, there's an identicalness between the two stamps in many respects, but you could take the color at a certain location on one stamp is the same. It's absolutely the same as the color on the other. That's a valid concept, Blanchard says. But if you go up to something like stamp, well, there's no one stampness in all stamps. There's just that particular image and color arrangement on those two identical stamps. But stamps are not identical. They're very different. So stamp is vague. Stamp, like nominalists are right about stamps. And they're right about printed matter. And they're right about man-made objects. And they're right about truth and justice and goodness and so. But we've got stamps. We've got Ayn Rand 33-cent stamps. We can handle that, boy. So we're solidly grounded there. It's just goodness, truth, morality, reason, logic. We have to give those to the nominalists, but we're doing pretty good. So the question is, how can the differing things be treated as the same? You can't strip away the differences to get something that's identical unless you want to restrict it to postage stamps, where we don't need a concept. You don't need a concept, Ayn Rand 33-cent stamp or any other, you use a descriptive phrase, you don't even need that, but you don't need concepts for where the things are identical. You need them for where the things aren't identical. I like to say abstraction is not insight. That's the way it's been treated. What is it? Concept is not a kind of percept. It is not a seeing. It's an interrelating. And this is a revolution. This is a revolution in Ayn Rand's approach to universal. Other people have viewed concepts as classifying and so forth, but not that there's a universal, there's an objective thing if you interrelate concretes instead of looking for it in one. So it's not looking into the mouse, it's relating the mouse to the clicker. They're actually very similar. Both move, both send a signal, probably infrared, to a electronic product. I just happen to have this here. Electronic product to accomplish a task that it can do. So there is a similarity there, as opposed to the bottle, which sends no signals, is not connected to anything electronic, and does not control. It's not a control mechanism. So if you start looking wider, rather than narrower into the thing, you can find the basis of it, of a concept, of a universal, if you want to use that language. It requires two things that are similar and a foil, and something that's different. No two things are similar by themselves. And Ayn Rand's groundbreaking definition of similarity is what's behind her theory of concepts. Similarity is the relationship between two or more existents which possess the same characteristic or characteristics but in different measure or degree. So that handles the similar how. Why? Because the first two items, the pumpkin and the baseball, are similar in shape. Then if we start relating the baseball to the puck, no, we've left shape. that cannot be part of the same concept. Pumpkin and baseball could give rise to round or sphere, squashed sphere, slightly oblate spheroid, but puck cannot. It doesn't have that shape. Or if we want to compare the baseball and the hockey puck, we're at a very high level of abstraction. We're not talking about anything visual. We're talking about function. We're talking about knowing there are games. We're talking about knowing that sports games have something in common, spectator sports perhaps. And then we can see a relation of those two objects versus either the pumpkin or the hockey stick, because we switched to a new, as Ayn Rand terms it, conceptual common denominator, which is movable object essential to a game. I would have to refine that more. That's hit or pushed or shoved around to get it to a certain position that's essential to winning the game. But that's not true of the hockey stick. If you're going to relate the puck and the stick, I think you get the idea how you switch to a new conceptual common denominator. They are similar in terms of they're used in the same game. And if we go to the last two, we're switching to shape, back to a visual aspect, perceptually given similarity, which has nothing to do with the puck. So similar how means similar in a conceptual common denominator, similar along an axis of measurement where the things differ in degree. So similarity is this relationship. You have two things, A and B in my diagram, which are near together along an axis compared to C, which is far away. So A and B seem to go together. We perceive them in the form of similarity because of their measurement relationships, that they're close compared to C. Take away C and they're just in different places. To look clustered together, they have to be compared to a foil, to something that's far apart. So that's the beginning of the concept forming process. Where is the universal? The universal is man-made. The universal does not exist out there. There's the universal. This range is the universal. Now notice I've made, following a suggestion of Greg Salmieri, I've made the dots into a solid line. What I had is dots over here. What I still have is dots over here. I made it into a solid line. I put up guardrails. I put up a category. We now have a range. Yeah, things in this region, and there can be any value in this region, are near. So the universal is a range of measurements integrated by man to grasp measurement proximity within a range. Measurement proximity is within a range. And from that, we get Ayn Rand's definition of concept, a mental integration. See, it's an interrelating. It's not a mental insight. It's not what's left in view when you subtract. It's a mental integration of two or more units possessing the same distinguishing characteristic with their particular measurements omitted. So we don't specify where it is in this range. When we say it's blue, this is the blue range. And it's approximate. I used hard edges, but most concepts don't have hard edges. There's no hard edge where blue becomes not blue, the borderline cases. And that gives rise to the question, how similar, right? Objectivism says nature doesn't tell us how similar, but there are discontinuities in some axes. Like at birth, there's a big discontinuity. There's a big inflection point in the curve. The thing before birth is living on the blood of the mother. When it's born, the placenta is cut, it starts breathing, it starts perceiving the external world. There's a big difference there, and that's a good place to draw the line. You don't have to draw it there, but you can't defend drawing it hardly any other place. But there has to be some basis for drawing the line where you do if you're breaking up the continuous. And you do have to allow for borderline cases like greenish blue. So there's only one other piece to the puzzle. It's what we call the sum but any principle. It's another way of holding how revolutionary Ayn Rand's theory of concepts is, what it does that no other theory did. The basic principle of concept formation states, and this is a quote from her, she says, the basic principle of concept formation states that the omitted measurements must exist in some quantity but may exist in any quantity. Now, why is that important? Well, let's go back to Brand Blanchard. Brand Blanchard says the reason why we can't get beyond the identical postage stamps is one cannot isolate, even conceptually, an invariant character in the things that are called by the same name, like stamp, printed matter, right? One cannot identify even conceptually, an unvarying blueness or an unvarying quantity in 1 in a million. And he's right. He's right, but we don't need to. The whole point is we capture variant characteristics. It's not the invariant we're interested in. We're interested in the varying that varies within a range. We isolate a range of variation. And Ayn Rand gives famously, as the quintessence of her theory, the analogy of algebra. There's no invariant in A when you say 2A equals A plus A, or A squared equals A times A. It's not just, well, is it 6? Can we find 6 invariant in A? No, the whole purpose of the variable is to cover a range of possible values. And that's the whole purpose of concepts, to cover a range of triangles, a range of printed matter, a variation, difference. We want difference. We're not after identical postage stamps. We want to cover differences where those differences are differences in degree of the same underlying attribute. So she says at the end of the chapter where she presents her theory, let those who cannot find the manness in man attack algebra because they cannot find the A-ness in 2 or 2 million. And that is a brilliant summary of the sum but any principle. Just as A or X in a formula stands for some value of a variable, but can be any, so a concept man does not stand for manness. It stands for some degree of rationality in some form of human shape of body, but any of the possible ones, not any wide open. There's only a range of possible degrees of rationality and human shape variation. There's no human being that's round like a basketball. Some are, perilously close to that, but they're working on it. There's no human rationality that is equal to 100 Ayn Rands. There's no human shape that has 12 arms. So there is a range. You can have 2 arms. You can lose an arm. You can have longer arms, shorter arms. You can have rationality in the English language. You can have rationality, I guess, in the French language. Bad example. You can have rationality about stock market investing, rationality about whom to vote for. No, you can't have that today. Rationality about what to eat, about what career to pursue. You can have a wide variation, but they're all variations of subject matter and of effort and of degree of interest and so forth within the same varying range of measurements along a conceptual common denominator. What's in the other end of the conceptual common denominator? Pre-rational, sensory experience is contrasted to conceptual, rational functioning. So just seeing, or what your cat does, is not on, is that see, where, Ayn Rand and Homer Simpson are the extremes of the range within the human. What it's contrasted to is something humans also have, which is just seeing, smelling, tasting, right? So there is a foil, there is a range, and there's variation within the range. Very important that I'm not going to talk about today is the word. Although Wittgenstein says there's only the word, we hold that the word is a critical part of the process once you grasp variation within a range. The word retains it, makes it into a concept. If you don't have the word, you only have a fleeting impression. The word solidifies it, crystallizes it, makes it usable. So we don't want to underrate words, and I will be stressing that theme in the next lecture, but let's stop now. Questions?
Yes. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead a bit on things you'll cover in subsequent lectures, but would you say that the motivation for the human to basically find this range within the conceptual common denominator is from top to bottom a biological one? I mean, it's not like the mind goes around looking at any three objects to see which two are similar. That the motivation for it and the reason it's important to get it right is because a human is a certain type of mammal whose values in life require getting these things right.
Well, yeah, you are getting to the beginning of tomorrow's lecture.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a good question.
Thank you.
I would just be careful when you say biological, you don't mean like natural selection as created as a deterministic being.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah, it's survival is what we're after. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Could you comment on constitutional nominalism and how it has crept into the American politics and judicial thinking?
Yes, there are two theories. Is Tara Smith in the room? There's an intrinsic and a subjective theory, which Tara Smith has ably delineated, of constitutional interpretation, which had just exactly come out of these two theories of concept. The left here, as always, is subjectivist, right? They are the Antisthenes types, and they say it's whatever society says. The right to bear arms, that might have been true in 1787 when we started off, but today we have a living, evolving constitution, and society doesn't want you to have the right to bear arms, and that's the end of the discussion. So they're the subjectivists. The Scalia type and the originalist and the textualist, who you think at first blush are the good guys here, are the equivalent of Plato and the intrinsicists. They say, no, it's just the word. It's there, the law is there in the text, independent of our minds. It's intrinsic in the document. We can go back and try and guess what's in the mind of the legislature, or try to deduce what was in the mind of the legislature, but if it was in the mind of the legislature, that ends it. If we go back to the debates, as Scalia would, and see that the purpose of this, so let's say for the sake of argument, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms being necessary for a fully qualified, established militia, the language is something like that. Suppose they find out that actually They didn't think you had a right to bear arms except to be ready to be called to serve in effect in the National Guard. But in the debates, suppose they unearthed it, in the debates, no, you can't keep that and use it yourself for self-defense. That's for the defense of the country if the president calls you or the governor of your state. Suppose they found that. Well, too bad. That doesn't mean that the law is you don't have a right to own your gun. It means that that legislature was mistaken. The objective meaning of the right to bear arms in the full context philosophically looked at does give you the right to use them in self-defense and does not depend upon a militia. So it is not the case that the words, it is not the case that the words interpreted by the statements of the legislatures at the time are the final authority for the Constitution. It's philosophy that's the final authority, not in a subjective way, but philosophy constructed, this is my own view, constructed from the text as a starting point. So you read the Declaration, you read the Constitution as a whole, and you say, the purpose of this was to protect individual rights. That's what it's all about. Right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and the objective enforcement thereof. So if we find something that's not specifically barred, but is, I have to qualify this just a second. If we find something like the right to own a gun in your home for self-defense that's not specifically ruled out, we can interpret the Constitution, philosophically interpret it, to say, yes, you have that right. It doesn't matter that the legislators in the Constitutional Convention didn't get it. Now, the reason I said not specifically barred, if you take something like taxation or eminent domain, these are violations of individual rights. They're inconsistent with the Declaration of Independence and the general thrust of the Constitution. But you can't say, well, they say Congress have the power to raise taxes. They say Congress has eminent domain, but they got it wrong, so we're not going to pay attention to that. No, if they specifically say something in bright letter law, you have to amend the Constitution to fix that. But the case I was taking earlier is a case of interpretation. There's no part of the Constitution that says you can't have a gun and you can't use it for self-defense, but you can have one for the militia. No, that's an issue of interpretation, but it does say you can be taxed. The government can seize your property for eminent domain. So that has to be amended. You can't interpret that out. That's a long question, but you see it does come down to the intrinsic, the subjective, and the objective views of interpretation of the Constitution. All right, so ask your question.
My question's a little shorter than your answer just was.
I'm working on it.
I might have missed something. Why, if the CCD on your diagram that you had up there stretched from A to C, why was only A and B involved in the concept?
Because only they, good question. They are the similars. See if we can get it back up here. No.
I think people
Gone
can
into
remember
flux.
it.
You can remember.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. They're near. They are near.
Yes.
That's what it is. That's what makes you feel they belong together. That's what similarity is, nearness of measurements. But nearness is relative. You will see, as you just look at this diagram, are A and B close? Yeah. Are A and C close? No. Compared to A and C or B and C, A and B are close. So I can put them together. I can create a range for them, but the way you will look at this, like the A and B are the two shades of blue, and C is a yellow. It will look different. You won't be tempted to put them together because the contrast, I can put it this way, and I should have in the lecture. Consciousness is a difference detector. Consciousness responds to difference, change, contrast. Here, the big contrast is between both A and B and C. That's much bigger than the contrast of positions of A and B. So the big difference swamps the little difference. The little difference looks like nothing compared to the big difference.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand. If the CCD stretches over all of them,
Yes.
why aren't they all considered part of the same concept?
When
That
you get
includes
to the
CCD.
concept of the second order, they will be. So tomorrow you'll see how that works.
I'll wait.
Okay. So yeah, let me answer it preliminarily another way. The CCD for a beginner is implicit. The CCD is not something he's aware of. It's the background. So a child with a box of crayons is aware of the two blues and the orange. He's not aware of hue. Hue is the CCD, but it's a very abstract idea. He sees this color and that color. He doesn't see color. Yes?
Sure. You mentioned John Locke, but not Aristotle. I was wondering if you could comment on Aristotelian.
Well, Locke is coming out of Aristotle, but in my view, he improves Aristotle. Aristotle thought that the things that belong to that are grouped together in the concept share an essence.
Right.
And the question is, what is that essence? And the Greek is toti and anai. What it is to be a. The what it is to be a man is in common. Yeah, but what does that mean? Locke kind of demystified that by saying it's an attribute. It's not an essence. And objectivism is in between Aristotle and Locke there. We believe that essence is a very good and important concept, but that it's epistemological, not metaphysical. So there are no essences apart from our conceptualization of things. Essence is relative to a kind, to a grouping. There's an essence of what makes you group men together. And that essence is the fundamental range that you're using to group them. The fundamental measurement nearness is the essence. Aristotle didn't see it that way. So Locke's more commonsensical version of Aristotle. But Locke is Aristotle sideswiped by Descartes. What he gets wrong is because of Descartes and Christianity. What he gets right is due to Aristotle. But I like Locke here on essence because it's more commonsensical. Although I bet to the Greeks, toti and anai seem more commonsensical than essence does to us. Essence is from the Latin essentia, and it is not idiomatic the way toti and anai is in Greek. But be that, it was treated by the scholastics as this. Well, there's this essence of things. So it's better in that respect. How am I doing on time? I've got 2 minutes, so let me take quick answers.
Okay, thank you. When we talk about the DC, we mention range or category of measurements. Category sometimes trips me up.
Okay.
Do we use that because of the discontinuities?
Yes. I'm glad you're asking these questions. These are good questions because they cover things I didn't have time to cover in a quick reprise of this material. Some CCDs are quantized. Triangle is a good example. There are no 3.5-sided figures. There's no 3.1 side. It's your 3-sided or 4-sided or 5-sided. There's no in between. So not everything is continuously varying, but most things are. So we need a theory that allows for continuous variation, but the term category as opposed to range is introduced to cover, well, 3 sizes is a category, not a range within a number of sizes. It's a range of 0 width, of just 3. So that's why it's there.
Thank you.
Next question. 1 minute, go ahead.
What motivates us to form concepts, and is it an instinct or a choice?
Choice. What motivates us to form concepts? My phone just dinged at me. The desire to get clear and in control. The child learns if he can say cookie, he has a better chance of getting cookie. But there's a pleasure in learning the names of things per se. So a child experiences an expanded range of awareness, and he knows that it's good to know. For instance, with his eyes open, it's good. He sees more, he can do more. Eyes closed, he's unsure. It's not good. Same with the mind. The more he can take in, the better he feels. Time's up, so I'll take your question next time. Thank you very much.